The world stands at a precipice, a moment frozen in time before the plunge. The year is 2026. For decades, the global order has been built upon a fragile foundation of energy interdependence. The Persian Gulf, with its vast reserves of oil and natural gas, has been the heart of this system, pumping lifeblood into the arteries of international commerce. But the heart is now showing signs of fibrillation. Tensions, simmering for years, have reached a boiling point. The great powers, once partners in a delicate dance of diplomacy and trade, are now sharpening their swords, their rhetoric growing more bellicose by the day. This is not a story of a single event, but a confluence of crises. Climate change has accelerated, making renewable energy sources more critical than ever, yet the transition is too slow, too fraught with economic and political hurdles. Old rivalries, long suppressed by the Cold Wars and the subsequent era of globalization, have resurfaced with a vengeance. Regional powers in the Gulf, emboldened by shifting alliances and advanced weaponry, are jostling for dominance, their ambitions clashing in a space no bigger than the state of Texas. The world watches, holding its breath, as the first domino begins to teeter. This is the story of the 2026 Gulf Energy War, the conflict that would redefine the 21st century. The first tremors were felt not in the sands of the desert, but in the digital realm. A sophisticated cyberattack, its origins shrouded in mystery and denial, cripples the primary command and control systems of a major Gulf state's oil infrastructure. Production terminals grind to a halt. Supertankers lie idle in their berths. The flow of oil, which the world had taken for granted, slows to a trickle. Panic erupts on global markets. Prices skyrocket, doubling overnight. Accusations fly thick and fast. Intelligence agencies from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Brussels, work frantically to trace the attack source. But the digital breadcrumbs lead to a hall of mirrors, pointing everywhere and nowhere at once. The cyberattack is the spark that ignites the tinderbox. In response, naval patrols are intensified in the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which a fifth of the world's oil supply passes. A minor miscalculation, a misunderstanding between a naval commander and a commercial vessel, escalates with terrifying speed. Warning shots are fired. A missile, launched in what is later described as a preemptive defensive action, strikes a tanker. The tanker, laden with millions of barrels of crude oil, erupts in a pillar of fire and smoke, a funeral pyre for the age of uninterrupted energy flow. The narrow strait is now a war zone. Insurance rates for shipping become astronomical, effectively closing the passage. The world's energy artery has been severed. The initial conflict is a dizzying blur of high-tech warfare. Drones, both aerial and maritime, swarm the skies and seas. Hypersonic missiles, previously a theoretical threat, are deployed with devastating effect, striking strategic targets with pinpoint accuracy before defenses can even react. Satellite systems, the eyes and ears of modern militaries, become primary targets, leading to a blinding of forces on the ground and at sea. Special operations forces engage in shadow wars, sabotaging pipelines, assassinating key personnel, and fueling proxy conflicts in neighboring states. The war is not just fought over oil fields, but in cyberspace, in outer space, and in the shadows. The economic fallout is immediate and catastrophic. Stock markets around the world enter a free fall. Industries dependent on petrochemicals, from manufacturing to agriculture, begin to collapse. The specter of a global depression, far worse than anything seen in the 20th century, looms large. Nations are forced to implement drastic energy rationing. Lines for gasoline stretch for miles. Power grids become unstable, leading to rolling blackouts. The interconnected global economy, once a source of prosperity, now becomes a transmission vector for economic contagion. The social fabric begins to fray as unemployment soars and essential goods become scarce. The great powers are drawn into the maelstrom, their strategic interests inextricably linked to the Gulf's stability. The United States, along the region's self-appointed policeman, finds its naval dominance challenged by a new generation of anti-ship missiles and asymmetric warfare tactics. Its carrier groups, once the ultimate symbol of power projection, become vulnerable giants. China, heavily reliant on Gulf oil to fuel its economic engine, sees its Belt and Road Initiative threatened and is forced to take a more assertive military posture to protect its energy lifelines. Russia, a major energy producer itself, plays a complex game, seeking to exploit the chaos to its own strategic and economic advantage, further complicating an already tangled web of alliances. The war expands beyond the initial belligerence. Regional alliances, forged in the preceding years, are activated. Countries that had maintained a careful neutrality are forced to choose sides, or have sides chosen for them. The conflict spills over into neighboring countries, destabilizing an already volatile region. Proxy wars erupt, fought by local militias armed and funded by external powers. Ancient ethnic and sectarian grievances are reignited and weaponized, adding a brutal and intractable dimension to the conflict. The humanitarian crisis is staggering. Millions are displaced, fleeing the fighting and the economic collapse. Refugee camps swell, creating new epicenters of instability and suffering. As the war grinds on into its second year, a grim new reality sets in. The initial high-tech blitzkrieg gives way to a brutal war of attrition. The global energy crisis deepens. Nations accelerate their push for energy independence, but the transition is painful and slow. The search for alternative energy sources becomes a desperate race against time. Fusion research, once a distant dream, receives unprecedented funding. But these are long-term solutions. In the short term, the world must cope with a new age of scarcity. The global order has been shattered. The unipolar moment is a distant memory, replaced by a multipolar world of competing blocs and shifting transactional alliances. The 2026 Gulf Energy War did not end with a clear victor or decisive treaty. It simply burned itself out, leaving behind a world transformed. The Gulf region lies in ruins, its oil infrastructure shattered, its societies fractured. The global economy is permanently scarred, smaller, more fragmented, and less resilient. The great powers, exhausted by the conflict, retreat to lick their wounds, their influence diminished. But from the ashes of the old world, a new one begins to emerge. The frantic push for energy independence during the war accelerated the transition to renewables by decades. A more decentralized, and perhaps more stable, energy system begins to take shape. The war served as a brutal, horrifying lesson in the fragility of a civilization built on a finite resource. It was a wake-up call, delivered at a terrible price, forcing humanity to confront its dependencies and finally to begin building a more sustainable future. The echoes of 2026 will reverberate for generations, a constant reminder of the day the world almost ran out of time. Thank you for watching.